This is a Film Stories original podcast.
We made this.
Hello everyone, this is Tony, Network Chief of We Made This. As you know, our podcast network brings together a brilliant assortment of talent who talk about all kinds of pop culture content, such as the episode you just listened to, or maybe you're just about to listen to. We're not going anywhere, but we'd love to keep the lights on for even longer if you're able to support our network on Patreon. For just £2 a month, you get your name in lights and the satisfaction of knowing you're helping us produce more great audio. And for £3 a month, you'll get your name in lights, but you'll also get access to an exclusive bi-monthly podcast from the We Made This talent pool on podcasting, pop culture, and, well, you tell us. We'll take your suggestions. For less than the price of a coffee per month, you can help keep We Made This going. Just head to patreon.com/We Made This. That's patreon.com/We Made This. And get the ball rolling. Now, back to your scheduled programming.
Welcome to the Starlight Ballroom. Hey!
Hello and welcome to Shipwrecked and Comatose, the Red Dwarf podcast right here on the We Made This podcast network. I am your host, Mark, for Series 3, Episode 6, The Last Day. And as always, I am joined by Kurt North. Hello, Kurt.
Hello, Mark. How are you?
I'm all right. I've been watching Red Dwarf, so things could be a lot worse. How about yourself?
Well, my dehydration level is at 33%. My recall of the previous evening is 100%. My embarrassment factor is 0. And the advised repair schedule is next Friday. So I'm doing all right.
Yeah, could be worse. And as we always do, we have a third host alongside us. Our guest host today is Carl Bryan. Hello, Carl.
Hello, Mark. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm still as good as I was a couple of minutes ago. How are you?
I'm okay. I powered off for 36 hours and I replaced my head.
What an evening. What an evening.
One night, yeah.
Well, yeah, good. I'm glad you're both seemingly well. We are looking at The Last Day, which was Series 3, Episode 6. So this is the last episode of our series on this one. We've got some specials coming up between now and our look at Series 4. But yeah, we have got an interesting one to finish with. Is this a favourite of yours, Carl?
It is actually. I like it because it's got one of my favourite guest performances in it.
Okay, cool. And what about you, Kurt?
I wouldn't say it's a favourite of mine. I really enjoy it. I think it's a good episode. It's when I was going through the run of like just running through all the episodes as a rewatch, I struggled to remember it. But the minute I put it on, it was like, right, okay. It wasn't one I can instantly recall, but it's still a great episode. Love it. I actually love it. I think it's a great finish to the season as well.
It's got one of the best physical gags in it, in probably all of Red Dwarf.
And there's a lot of very good physical gags. But I think I'm more along the lines of Kurt when it comes to this because it didn't ring a bell. And then when I watched it, I was, oh, yeah. So I do think I watched 4, 5, and 6 a lot more than 1, 2, and 3. But this episode was a pleasant surprise because it wasn't a favourite of mine, how good it was.
Yeah.
So should we get into it?
Absolutely.
So we start up with a mysterious pod heading to Red Dwarf, and straight after that, Crichton is bringing Lister's breakfast into the quarters. Lister is watching boxing, and Crichton queries it, and Lister defends it. And I don't know, I mean, I'm a huge fan of fight sports, and people are surprised by that because I'm a relatively gentle man for the majority of things, but I do love a bit of the punchy with the MMA and the boxing and the wrestling.
Female topless boxing?
Not female topless boxing. That'd be wasted on me. Does it actually exist?
Probably somewhere.
Probably somewhere, yeah.
topless darts existed.
I did think when Crichton says female topless boxing, I was like, that sounds like something from live TV.
Yeah.
European.
Topless darts was really a thing. And the whole premise was that it had girls, and it wasn't real darts. It was the first one to get a dart in the bullseye. And the whole reason was to get them to jump up and down with joy and their boobs to jiggle.
Mm.
It was not a subtle television program.
It had a dwarf on a trampoline as the weatherman.
It did. Live TV.
Yeah. Wow.
And tellingly, it was one of the first channels to bring British wrestling back to television.
Oh, don't. Let's not talk about wrestling. That's in my past. But yeah,
Sorry.
So they had this quite serious conversation about combat sports. And then it is, like you say, female topless boxing. And then it's another quite heavy philosophical discussion when Lister's telling him, I don't want you to serve me. And so don't do it. You're not my slave. But then he gets quite upset when Crichton bins the food.
I was trying to work that out because I like the fact that when Lister says, I'm my own man, he also adds in, you're your own man. Sort of goes in with the thing that he's still constantly backing up Crichton. But then when Crichton starts throwing everything away, part of me wonders, is he doing that because he feels, galvanized, like, yeah, you're right, I'm not a servant, chuck this away? Or is he passively aggressively like, well, I worked hard on this?
I would take the former, personally. It felt like, it was like...
I would have gone with latter.
Isn't that interesting? That's twice in 2 episodes we've done that.
He seems very happy when he took the word bon appetit, bin. It's like, yeah. But I didn't, but when he's doing it, it feels a bit like, well, fuck you, I've made fresh strawberries.
I think it's probably because the passive aggressive is how I'd respond to that kind of crap. Is probably why I think it's probably passive aggressive.
Right.
Because I like to cook for people. I think I would probably be passive aggressive about it.
Yeah.
He's not, by the way. I'm not, at no point am I saying he's horrible. I'm just saying that if I was in that situation, I'd be pissed off rather than liberated.
Yeah, I completely read that the opposite way.
Why so, though, Kurt?
I don't know. I just felt like, as I say, it was like a liberating experience. It's like it's someone telling them that, you don't have to do this. You're on for bigger, better things. And I think the episode is trying to say that as well. I think it's like saying, don't be the maker of your own destiny rather than, a slave to the ideals or the concepts in which you're boxed in with. And that's kind of like, to be honest, that is a bit like me, if I'm thinking about it, to be fair. I don't conform to some not standards, that's probably the wrong word, but some like what people perceive as, you must do this and you must have this and you must have that. Or, and conversations you have at work and whatever. And it's like, I don't agree with, I don't have that vision of such and such. So that's probably me reflecting on that scene as much as you with it as well.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
I was going to say, it kind of runs through the episode from on a small scale to a large scale of Lister at the very beginning, like, don't make me breakfast, and sort of like, break your programming, you're your own person, right up to the end of don't kill yourself just because your creators have told you to, you're your own person. And sort of, it's all the way through, isn't it? It's sort of telling Crichton that he can be his own droid. But obviously, he does make a cracking waffles and strawberries.
Yeah. And I think Crichton's a bit like me. I pride myself on the fact that I can cook, and I want to cook for my partner. I want to cook for my friends. And it's a choice for me to do that. It's not like I'm serving anyone.
We had this discussion in Crichton, the episode as well, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. It's a very similar thing, actually.
I'm programmed to serve. It's that thing of the garden and breaking your programming. And is it? You can view it like I think we said in Crichton. You can view it as, is it a reflection of Lister wanting him to feel like he's doing good by asking Crichton to break his programming, or is it the fact that he really wants Crichton to break his programming because it's good for him.
I think it's probably a bit of both, to be honest with you. It's kind of like a moral quandary for Lister, I think.
Because, like you said, he does want the breakfast.
He does.
once he sees what it is, he does want it, and that's the same as you said. Is like, oh, it's almost Lister trying to gauge whether he's trying too hard. In the has Crichton made me this breakfast because he believes he's serving me, or has Crichton made me this breakfast because he's my friend and he wanted to make me breakfast? If you get what I mean.
Yeah.
Whereas Rimmer, liking Crichton, would give him a reams of paper of things to do because it's like, I can get him to do that. Where Lister's more of a case of, well, you can make me breakfast, but don't do it because you have to. Do it because you want to.
Yeah.
And Lister does want to, so he does. He eats it out of the bin in his hat.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, Crichton returns, and Lister, to kind of show how much of a hypocrite he is, so the dinner ends up on his head, hat, and an item from the pod. It's a letter from Crichton's creators, and there's a video message that says, Crichton's shutdown chip will shut him down in 24 hours. Bang, it'll hit you with something that's so emotional so quickly that you'd think you'd by this point. Rimmer's dad, for example, was a kick right in the feelings. And you're like, but Crichton.
Yeah, it's something, and it's something that gets explored throughout the episode of, you wouldn't expect Crichton to have, from half the episode, you believe he's going to shut down.
Yeah.
He's just going to stop operating. Like, you wouldn't expect a robot, and like any other sort of TV or film, you wouldn't expect a robot to have a lifespan. But here the guy from, is it Diva Droid International's name is Jim Reaper.
Yeah, I was about to say that as well.
Yeah.
It's I love a pun, but that one is not a subtle one.
I tell you what's not subtle: Robert Llewellyn's hair.
Well, we'll get into double Polaroids in a few seasons' time, but
yes.
But
well,
what I would ask at this, I'll ask at this point because it's coming to mind that the very concept. This is something that I see quite a lot in a lot of movies, and something that I pointed out in the Truman Show, is that it's an artificial intelligence. It's obviously an emotional artificial intelligence. It has its and there's obviously aspirations for RoboCop and stuff like that in this episode. It's not lost. You mentioned Back to the Future last week, and obviously Aliens a few weeks back. But this idea of corporation controlling like an intelligence, and this is another one that kind of is using that. It has a religious analogy as well, but there's this idea that they have complete control over that. They can just destroy a life with the flick of the finger. And, that's him done. That's him done. And they've programmed him in a way and used a device to make them numb to the pain, numb to the fact that there is something beyond, and giving them that idea of, you've done your bit here. Now you're going to get the reward for doing your bit. And that's control. Which is the way I read it. I know different people will read this differently, but the way I read it is that it's an intelligence being controlled.
The snarky consumer in me, when he said, like, why have you got to pack yourself away in this? Oh, well, how else are they going to sell the latest models if we last forever? And like, Apple phones.
Yeah.
Oh yes, that's exactly what I thought of too. It's brutally anti-capitalist and quite a dystopic future that they've really touched on before. It's quite, something like Games Workshop 40K is explicitly dystopic, a savage capitalist society. And it hits you in the face from the first page you read of any book or any role-playing system. Whereas this kind of came from out of nowhere, that there is this brutal capitalist dystopic future in Red Dwarf as well.
Yeah, and they do, just so you know, touch up on it in the Dave ones as well.
Right.
So they're not obviously we're in a different world now. So they do touch up on this Apple consumerism kind of thing. So it's something that we will delve into in the future. But this one for me, even though it does have that feeling to it, there is the question which has come up time and time again, that religious aspect of, even to the point where Crichton's saying, well, no, that's just something made up for you idiots kind of thing.
The thing is, it's another one. And so I do feel like I'm justified in saying that the writers actively attack religion in Red Dwarf. It happens too frequently for it to be anything other than deliberate. There's obviously some kind of anti-religion going on in the heads of the writers. And I don't know, as someone who believes in a secular society, anti-religion is as bad to me as religious nuts, personally. So I don't know. I think my opinion of the writers has changed a little bit as we've got further into Red Dwarf. And it's not because of the 80s ick. I do feel like that can be forgiven because it's indicative of the time. It's because of the way they just consistently have this anti-religious agenda that's not useful. Am I being fair or am I being too humanist?
I would say that I have less of an issue with it personally, but that's not to say that you're not being fair. I think it is very pointed. They're making it explicit that on what they believe and what they don't believe, or they're making it explicit that they are pointing the finger at religion for a number of different things. I think personally, it's intended a bit more jovial than you may be thinking it is, but that's just my opinion of it. It's not necessarily being that's what it is, but it feels it is more of a jovial thing to me.
I looked at it a bit like it was two people saying the same thing in a different way. When Crichton said, "Oh no, humans don't go to heaven," somebody made that up to stop you all going nuts. That's exactly what Lister's just been saying to him when talking about Silicon Heaven. So I'm the same as you, Carl. I don't think it's as serious of a knock as it could be, but I think it's pointing out that how all religion, you could also almost see it as how all religions do kind of follow a similar, I don't want to, what's the best way, foundation, almost of like, be good and you'll
well it's the control thing, like I said with the corporations. The corporations have taken over the religion, really. It's like well, for me personally, this is just my viewpoint because I'm a secular guy. I don't believe in anything like that, but it always feels to me like there's an element of control with ways, and some people need that. So I'm not denying their beliefs. I'm not joking against them or anything like that at all. Some people need that in their lives, and that's something they actively seek for. And if they find the thing they're looking for, I'm all for that. There's not a problem with it. I think this is like a debate on that element of it, whether or not there is that step of, is there the framework that's built in around that situation? Is it designed there? Because you could go even more dystopian with like, because it's not saying that there's assisted suicide or stuff like that, because a lot of religions don't have that, whereas that is assisted suicide really, because you've got a deadline on thing. I just think it's more of a look at a reflection of what's what is the corporation doing compared to what religion would do. So, but I can see it when I'm talking about it there, that you could have this thing of like, does it sound ridiculous? But to somebody it might do, but to other people, they might absolutely 100% believe in that, and that's their right. And if they do that, then I'm happy for them.
And I just add some clarity on terminology that secular doesn't mean non-religious. Non-religious and secular are different things. Secular, you can be a secular person of faith. Believing in a secular society means that you expect everybody to be treated equally, regardless of what their faith may or may not be. And a secular society would not have, for example, priests in the House of Lords. It would have you wouldn't have anyone who is in a privileged position because of the faith that they do or don't have. And as a non-religious humanist person myself, I would not want to go the other way and have a society that is explicitly non-religious, because that is just as unfair.
Yeah.
Would suit me better, but that's not what equality is.
No.
And I think there is a tendency for non-religious folk to be secular in 2020. I'm not sure that was the case in 1989, 1990. I think a lot of non-religious folk would have gone as far as being anti-religious because they'd had bad experiences with their religious upbringing. And I think that has changed in the last 30 years, that most non-religious folk don't give a monkeys. They are quite secular, whereas that might not have been what it was like in 1989. So again, pure speculation.
Yeah.
Perhaps the writers had unpleasant experiences with religion.
Right. It's okay. So just as a side note to that, because it's just of not necessarily my upbringing, but my belief, I made a point, and I don't know if it's more of a character trait of me than anything else, that I refused to go to any assemblies in the mornings because it was like, it's a religious thing. I do not believe I should be in here. And I did the same with funerals, to be honest, for a long time, where I was like, I'm not gonna attend that place because it's not my place of being. I did over the years. I've had to like sort of, and this goes back to what we were saying before, actually, about some of the stuff that the reflection of me, the way that I am kind of like the way that I perceive things slightly different to a lot of people. Now I've softened on that because sometimes you have to conform to some degree. But I was very kind of like staunchly against going to the assembly because it was like saying the prayers and all that kind of thing. It's like, why do I have to do that when I don't believe in it? So you know what I mean? It was that kind of like stance. And it was like, just get on with it. But I was like, no, I'm not interested in that at all. It's not me.
But the difference is you weren't hating on people of faith. No. You were saying, I don't have faith, so I shouldn't have to say prayers. Yeah. That's secularism. That's not anti-religion.
Yeah.
I don't feel like this is a secular thing. It's an attack. And it's not like I don't agree with it. I just wouldn't put it in as unpleasant and flippant a way as it is done with the whole Silicon Heaven discussion, I don't think. We all got really serious then. Should we move on?
Oh, I quite liked it.
Where do all the calculators go, though?
Oh.
So Colin's got, so Quee turns up and you've got to start doing that every opportunity. So where do the calculators go? Oh, no, but not that, but not only that, but where do the calculators go?
Yeah, it's the accent being ironed out in this one, isn't it? Where all the calculators go. It's
more like it.
I mentioned it in the last.
Let's move on to the gag about Rimmer saying that he was a Samaritan and points out that a lot of people took their own life. That was one that we'd seen from Dad, which we looked at the end of last series. But what I did do there was phrase it as taking their own life. That is not how they phrase it in Red Dwarf. They call it committing suicide, which again is linked, ironically, to faith, because it was committing a sin to take your own life. And in fact, it is the only sin that you can't be forgiven for because you can't speak to a priest about it. And so it's fascinating to me that a overtly religious term comes up moments after an attack on religion. And it's also a term that is going out of favor in favor of taking their own life or taking your own life. And yeah, I think it just made me smile that it happened so quickly that they made a religious reference immediately after. And I bet they didn't know they'd made a religious reference because it was so ingrained into society. The whole committing part of commit suicide is committing a sin against God. So they live in this wonderfully Christian 1989 that they're rebelling against, that they don't even know the terminology they're using.
Is that what you're doing? Are you rebelling?
I did find it because obviously Rimmer said that it made the papers. It was called Lemming Sunday. I kind of enjoyed
Again, come on.
Yeah, I kind of enjoyed the fact that he seems to have come to peace with that. He doesn't look super happy that the papers named it, but he's kind of like, yeah, that was a thing that happened. Whereas I think if it was any of us, it would be haunt us until our end of days. But Rimmer seems to have come to terms with it incredibly quickly.
Yeah.
But it does seem to me like Rimmer's advice of respecting people's beliefs, Rimmer being the smarmy guy, the figure of fun character, is the one that's, well, bang on. And it's not the character you'd expect, really.
Yeah. I will say just before that, though, he does have that line where he says, that's the more than 24 hours notice. That's more than most of us get. All we get is normally, mind that bus, what bus, splat.
He's right. It's another thing you can put down in the book of Rimmer actually being right in a kind of sick way.
Yeah. And Lemming Sunday, even though it's obviously a completely different context, I cannot help but think of the game Lemmings.
Yeah.
I just instantly, I love that game.
Oh, yeah. I think it might have even been influenced by that because wasn't Lemmings quite popular around this point?
Yeah, it will have been. Yeah.
I downloaded it the other day to replay it again and it still holds up.
It's one of those games I can imagine that you would start the first level and remember the level. You know, it's like Sonic the Hedgehog, Alex Kidd for me. As soon as you start playing it, you're like, I know exactly where this is. I know exactly where that is. It's just one of those games that's just like memorable.
Oh yeah, I can picture the first level of Lemmings now. It's you use the digger, and then they all go down and maybe block one off so they don't go to the I remember it very vividly.
I mean, the thing that was so vivid to me about Lemmings was the kind of tinny "let's go" at the start of every level, and it was just so adorable, but also really quite awful that you knew that these "let's go," these cute little things were jolly and happily about to walk off a cliff. It was really quite a sick game, actually.
Or when you blew one up, they'd look at it and go, oh no.
I'm going to have to play Lemmings again, aren't I? I'm going to have to.
I need to play me some Lemmings, I think. Back to the show. Blah, 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 blah. Anti-religious. I had enough of that. Lister suggests that they have a big party to give Crichton a send-off.
Just before you go there, there's one thing that I want to mention, that Chris Barry seems to have got Crichton down before Crichton has got Crichton down, before Robert Llewellyn's got Crichton down.
I thought it was Reagan.
What? I thought it was Reagan.
I thought he was doing a Reagan impression.
It's Crichton's fun. Oh, yes, the employment of time in a pointless and non-practical way.
I just love the fact that when that gets called back to, that when he gets the invitation, that's what it says, and he goes, It's like, Rimmer's nailed it.
It's just Chris Barry because he can, really, isn't it?
I think you're right about this series being Robert Llewellyn essentially using this series to get himself ready to play the character fully from series 4 onwards. And maybe the rest of the cast, like Chris Barry, are kind of warming to the character as well. And that's where that comes from, is that by this point, the last episode, Chris Barry has got the concept of the character, same as Robert Llewellyn has.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. It's the thing as well is obviously it's Robert Llewellyn's first one. It's Hattie Hayridge's first one as well. And I think she's kind of, as much as she can, being a disembodied head, hit the ground running.
Yeah.
She's getting all the facial expressions done well. The only thing I've noticed, which has been a bit weird, is her eye line seems to be slightly above camera, if you get what I mean. She's not looking down the lens.
She's looking middle distance rather than like at the camera, so more like that.
She does it a few times in this. And that's kind of weird and off-putting now looking back at it. But then other times she is looking straight down the thing.
You see, I read that completely differently. I read that as she was deliberately playing Holly as scatty. and a bit distracted and a bit of a weirdo.
I don't know. It did look like she was reading off a card.
I suppose so. Good point.
Speaking of reading off a card, we'll get into that in a minute.
Lister is trying to build a Marilyn Monroe droid. The cat asks, does he think whether Crichton will seduce her? But Lister explains that Crichton's basically like Action Man. Which isn't true. He's got a hole there because he's got a fucking socket to put his fucking Hoover in.
Maybe they blocked that out after what happened last time. Was it? He's supposed to be able to construct that entire droid in under 2 hours with a pot of glue.
Well, this is the thing about as much as I don't want to go back to this discussion, not argument, this discussion, but again about this corporation thing, because that's a dig at IKEA. And that's,
absolutely.
That's a dig at consumerism again, isn't it? So
yeah, it's and also the fact that it doesn't look like what it does in the shop.
No.
Look at the box. Look at the face on the kit. But part of me wonders if that's because Lister does say towards the end that he's not finished it yet. Whether it's supposed, because it's basically the only thing that makes it look human is the hair and it's got boobs.
Yes.
He did a lot better job with Crichton, didn't he, really?
What did Peterson buy it for? Because he says Peterson bought it on Planet Leave.
Why? That is something we forgot to talk about last episode about the puncture repair kit.
Yes.
We didn't mention that last week.
It's such a triumphant call as well, isn't it?
Crichton, get out the puncture repair kit.
I'm alive.
Sorry, we're going back a week.
I like the fact that things get revealed, even though they're long gone now. Things get revealed about like some of the crew that have been passed away still, even in like series 3 of this happened. Oh, Peterson bought a Marilyn Monroe droid for no reason. No reason that we admit to on a TV show. But yeah, it's a bit weird. Maybe he just wanted to dance with it.
Maybe.
Or
maybe get him to sing to him. Maybe.
Yeah, that could be it.
Shall we move on from this and talk about Crichton doing the ironing? And he gets the invite that you talked about, which was funny. And he arrives at his party. He's served an android homebrew and mechanoid food. And he's got from everybody. But I just want to pause and say, I really liked Holly's tiara.
It does look good, doesn't it? It's... I think it's in this one that they alter the colour a bit, because obviously with Norman Lovett was quite grey initially, and then they kind of bumped the colour up a bit in series 2. Hattie Hayridge seems to almost have like silver skin, but the hair is still bright blonde. And the lipstick, obviously.
You're talking about chrome key as well. They kind of like highlight quite a bit of contrast and stuff with her as well, where the beginning of Holly in season 1 was kind of digitized and obviously more digital. They went back to like more of a normal looking head. And then with Holly Hilly, they've kind of gone the other way. They've kind of gone back to season 1 in some ways, which they've gone really contrasty, so much so that it's actually popping out on the screen, which I thought was interesting on that regard.
Also, is this the debut of Bob the Scutter?
Was it Bob?
Because when he gets his invitation, Crichton goes, "Oh, thank you, Bob."
Oh, right, okay.
And Bob seems to be the one that lasts all the way through.
Potentially, yeah.
I don't know. I think so.
Yeah. And one last thing I want to point out is, because I don't think we've mentioned it in a couple of other episodes, how good the incidental music is.
Yeah.
Oh, it's the most 80s music ever.
Oh, it's a Casio going to its full potential.
Yeah,
it's magnificent.
You can just imagine someone buying the part 6 of the keyboard booklets they used to get, and it's like they've just gone, right, no, I can't do that. I'll just put program 16 in.
Yeah. Just see Howard Goodall turning to Grant and Naylor going, "Look at this sound effect this one does." Yeah. Da, 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 da. Yeah, yes.
It was definitely a thing.
Do any of you remember Cheeky Vimtos?
Yes, of course.
Yes.
Because he gets a cross between Vimto and liquid nitrogen. And I was just like, it made me think about Cheeky Vimtos. That's all it was. It was obviously after this fact, but it was just a nice memory of mine. It's like, oh, Cheeky Vimtos. I remember the rage of them.
Do you remember my lovely story about how I was once approached by an attractive man in a gay nightclub?
Yes.
I was drinking Cheeky Vimto during that story.
What was in a Cheeky Vimto? Was it?
It was Blue Wicked.
It was a bottle of Blue Wicked with a double port.
Right, that was it. Because I used to make, when I worked pubs, I used to make turbo shandies.
Which was half a lager with a bottle of Smirnoff Ice.
Yeah.
You're naming all the drinks of my childhood. Well, not childhood, my teenage years.
You know what the drinks of my childhood or teenage years were?
Go on.
Lager. Having said that, until I was 23, I used to drink dry cider.
Oof.
So I used to be a big cider drinker for a long time. It was only when it really started to hurt that I stopped, because I could normally handle it. But about 23, 24, I was really struggling.
Here's a controversial one. What do you call a half a lager, half a cider with a shot of blackcurrant? What do you call that?
Snakebite and black.
Yeah, snakebite and black.
See, in the University of Salford Students' Union, that was a diesel.
I've heard it called diesel before. Yeah.
Mm. And the other one I
thought something else was called diesel. But
was that a Guinness? Was that a Guinness and black diesel?
No, that was just a Guinness and black.
That was just Guinness and black.
The other one I had was at a nightclub in Hull called Spiders. And it wasn't a subtle one. It was half a lager, half a cider, black, and a double Jack Daniels. And that delightful beverage was called a Nasty Shag.
I've heard of those.
Okay. I used to drink JD and Coke. I still do drink JD and Coke, actually. But Spiders means something completely different to me, and it's more of a friend thing. That I wasn't on this holiday, but to call a lovely, attractive young woman without getting their attention, you used to say Spiders. That's all it was. And it was to call attention to somebody near to you. And then the rest of the friends would be like, all right, where? Spiders.
So a bit like Hetero-Polari.
Hetero-Polari?
Yeah. You don't know what Polari is, do you?
No.
Polari was a secret gay language used in the 40s and 50s so that gay people could talk to other gay people about what they would like to do that evening and socialize, etc., etc. And for example, if you've heard the word naff, to me, not very good. That was originally a acronym in Polari, which stood for not available for fucking.
Yeah, that sounds quite interesting, Mark. Is there a podcast anywhere that may talk about that somewhat at all?
Now, wouldn't you know that I am launching a podcast about Polari? It's going to be called Aunt Nell, and Aunt Nell is Polari for listen. Don't know if it'll have launched by the time this airs, but we are already on Twitter. If you go to if you go to @AuntNellPod.
Is it a contractual arrangement now that we've got to at least mention one other podcast while we're on it? We can't mention any more, just the one
think so.
In the main show. Yeah. That seems to be the...
Sorry, Carl. Cerebral Jukebox is out this time.
That's okay. I just like throwing out subjects randomly and seeing if Mark's got a podcast about it.
I mean, it's not beyond the realms of imagination.
And if he doesn't, he generally starts one. So...
Only if you're there. Let's get back to the plot before we start 3 more podcasts. Moving on. So the gifts are a chip from Holly, George Patton's sinus fluid from Rimmer, an earring that the cat didn't like, and the aforementioned Marilyn Manson droid. And she malfunctions and walks through a wall.
Okay, so the chip. It's a computer chip. It's a very recognizable computer chip, isn't it? So much so that you could almost like instantly recall it from memory.
Oh, yeah.
Does Mark have any idea what we're talking
right now.
about?
No.
Watch the actual scene, because you've got Robert Llewellyn as Crichton looking down, reading it from a sheet of paper, and it's so obvious that he's doing it.
Oh, I see.
It's like,
he tries to look up, but he fails miserably.
It's basically, the line is, it's a computer chip. It's a 5517-1 30 alpha SIN modem, the interface circuit with a built-in 599 XRDP. Oh, how did you know? And he's literally looking down. You can tell he's like reading it, which I don't blame him. one bit. But
I mean, it's not an easy line to remember.
No, it's not an easy line even to say when you're reading it, let alone trying it. But it is good, especially some of the smeg ups you see in future, where, you know, that famous one where they're trying to cross the paper over to each other and just getting it all wrong, which is amazing.
I remember that bit on the commentary. It's on the DVD for this episode, where he's doing it, and you just hear Craig Charles and I think Danny Nunes go, "Go on, Bobby, you've got it. Go on, Bobby."
Oh, it's brilliant.
I had to do a film once where, as part of the film, I was questioning somebody, and I was reeling off really rapid questions. But one of them was, I would say a 12-digit number really, really quickly, because I was testing a child to see if they had superpowers, and I was like, "Can you remember this number? 6434." And I had to reel it off really, really quickly. And we ended up writing it on the wall behind the child's head, but enough where it didn't ruin my eye line,
right?
For me to do it, because I tried and failed. I did a proper Llewellyn on it and just had to read it off the wall in big letters.
I think one of my proudest moments as when I worked in the wrestling industry was when I interviewed probably the most famous Japanese wrestler of all time, Jushin Liger. I interviewed him in Japanese. And the way I did it was, I've got a mate who's fluent in Japanese. So I sent him the list of questions. He translated it and then wrote it out phonetically in English. So behind the camera, there was a guy holding pieces of paper with obviously gobbledygook, but it was like phonetically written Japanese. And yeah, it worked surprisingly well, but you could totally tell I was reading an auto cue.
I need to see that. That was the first time we hadn't met yet, but that was my first experience of you, is seeing you do interviews at PCW. So I have not seen you interview Liger. That'd be really interesting.
And I speak proper Japanese. He understands it and responds, and it's all subtitled, and I'm really proud of it. And it is still up on the internet. So at some point, I'll share that on Twitter and stuff.
Yeah, one of the first times I met Mark, I'll just share this here. I think Mark knows this story. Was our mutual friend who's on Tat Club with Mark Malachi took me to a show, and there was all these people there. And it's like, "Oh, there's so and so's wrestling here tonight, and blah de blah." And I looked over and went, "Is that Magic Mark Adams?" And my mate just went, "Yeah." I was like, "Wicked!" So of everybody there, I was really excited to see Mark.
You're a fucking idiot. I'm so sorry I was an anticlimax.
No, not at all. He was just like, "I've seen him on the YouTubes."
It feels like so long ago, all of that stuff. It really does.
Didn't even know what a podcast was then.
Oh, I did. I had a wrestling podcast.
I probably had one as well, to be fair. Yeah.
The aftermath of all of this is that Crichton gets very drunk and has a dance. Lister tells the story of when he shat off the Eiffel Tower, and Rimmer tells the story of his first kiss being his Uncle Frank. But could we just not talk about that?
Well, I talking about quotable things we still say now. I feel the urge to strut my funky stuff is something I've said.
Yeah,
it's and I do. It's the first kind of in this. I don't know why, but from watching it again for this podcast, this series, Crichton seems to be a bit more laddie. If you know, like he's rocking out to rock music in the previous episode. He's when they tell him that he can drink the pint, he goes, "Oh, good head," and then there's the really edited D thing.
Yes,
which I thought a perfect comic timing of Robert Llewellyn blows it out of his nostrils before they do the edit. And I thought that just looked really cool, really good.
Yeah. And of course, then when he falls off the chair as well, that's kind of like a gag, isn't it? So, but I do think we need to talk about the mum thing though, because I think that's really pertinent to Lister's story, and it's interesting how because one of the things I noted was that Kat joins in, and he's done it a couple of times, but of late, as they get more confident, they start using. Kat is normally on Lister's side and teaming up against Rimmer, but he does, like Cats do, change sides, and he's having a bit of a a thing against Lister at that point, and joining in because he's like that whole mob mentality kind of thing. But this is obviously reinforcing the cardboard box underneath the pool table thing. So I think it's for that reason. It's interesting because it's the first time you see Lister, I think, get really upset, angry. Yeah, isn't it? When they keep alleging his parents were related. Which is funny because in a roundabout way, he's his own dad, so it's kind of weird. And good
point. But it's not just Lister, is it? It's Crichton that gets upset about not having a mum because he's got kind of mechanoid drunk as well.
And I like the fact Holly's drunk too, and Holly says that she's never had a mum. And she kind of like goes a bit too far and realizes it just as she does it, because she's obviously like saying, I'm sorry, to realize it once she gets too far. And the fact that I remember when I was younger, really finding the delivery of "Well, you can all have mine," just absolutely. It's still funny now, but back then for some reason it was really funny that this moment of utter. Sort of sharing and everything like that was just punctuated by Rimmer, who probably hasn't been listening. Yeah, he's just been stewing in this whole thing about his Uncle Frank, and he's just come back into it. Got you could all have mine. Yeah, everyone else has. It's a very convincing drunk group of friends. It is. And
I think you're right that it is a group of friends at this point. Is very much established that they've got to this point after a rocky start where they didn't know each other very well, or they were different species with the cat and the others. And they genuinely have bonded at this point. And that is almost setting a precedent for series 4 onwards, where it is a clear friendship group.
Yeah. Even, and Crichton's been accepted so quickly back into it, which shows just how much they're sort of banding together and things like that, because he was gone for all of 2, and the fact that Holly's changed sex since the last series, and it's never mentioned. It's just okay, Holly's changed sex. Okay, great. It's still Holly. It's still their friend.
I think that's actually quite important when you think about it, particularly with all the trans issues that we've been having over the last year or so with, let's just say with J.K. Rowling being a nasty, turfy cunt and basically popularising that horrible, horrible opinion that in 1989 it was treated with dignity and sensitivity in Red Dwarf.
Yeah, It just, I think they must have seen it as like, unless the sitcom would have made a joke about it. Yeah. And it's just taken out as of the change. They've just changed what Holly wants to be.
I don't think they'd ever have done it like the sort of "you used to be a man" joke. It is "you are now a woman." Yeah. It's I don't think I don't think it even crossed the mind. I think it was just like, Holly's a new cat. Hilly did really well. The woman that played Hilly did really well. We're just going to change the sex of Holly and use Hattie. I don't think it would have been. Wasn't the explanation it was in that really fast scroll that it was Holly was so enamored with how he looked in the parallel universe, he changed himself into how she looked. Yeah. That was it. And I thought that's really quite cool. It's, I look better as a woman. I'll just change. Yeah.
They all got drunk, and funnily enough, they all passed out in their quarters. So the morning after, a addendum from our friend Jim Reaver pops up, and it's saying that Crichton's replacement is on its way, Hudson 10. And it is 10 times smarter and stronger than all other droids. Is there a gag in Hudson 10 that I haven't got?
It's my favourite physical gag in a lot of the series is the smashing of the brick. Yeah, it's just the thrust afterwards. It's so unmechanoid.
Oh yeah, the way she does shuffles.
Yeah. You almost get the feeling it was Gordon Kennedy messing around and they just left it in.
Yeah.
Sorry, Mark, were you saying is there a gag in the name Hudson 10?
Yeah. Well, I would have thought there's a reference that I've not...
Isn't it upstairs, downstairs?
Maybe.
Or Sherlock Hudson?
I just wondered whether there was any significance in the name. If there isn't, there isn't. I'm just looking for stuff that isn't there.
I think it's the name of the butler in Upstairs, Downstairs.
Oh, okay. Maybe that's what it is.
Yeah.
Gordon
Kennedy beginning the tradition of getting members of the Absolutely team to dress up as giant mechanoids. Once it's Jack Doherty in a couple of series. So apparently the science that Hudson writes on the board, because Gordon Kennedy is, he went to university for that kind of thing. He can write it, so apparently that science does work out.
Oh, right, okay.
Which is I thought was quite cool.
Brilliant. So they did the thing that Big Bang Theory did in the first few series, years before Big Bang Theory.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And then obviously they show the DVDs, don't they? Red Dwarf DVDs.
Yeah. So Crichton wakes up and gets a damage report, which amused me because, we all get our damage report when we wake up when we've had far too many. So it's very much like a person hangover. Lister's got a traffic cone and the cat has got a police officer's helmet and some suspense. And basically, Crichton enjoyed himself and is freaked out because he did. And that's so adorable.
It's delivery of his line of "one night's not enough, I want more." It's like, oh, bless him.
Yeah. And they rally around him as well, don't they? So that's also talk about the friendship thing. They're like, oh, okay, well, let's just do it then. Let's just cancel the service contract. Let's do it. It's like without fail until obviously Hudson turns up and there's a bit more of an issue. But
yeah, even Rimmer's looking quite concerned and saying, "Oh, it's 10-7." Yeah, it's interesting to see because they could have just not let him in, isn't it? But they sort of said they had to face him. Well, Holly had to let him in. But yeah.
I mean, well, could that be? I might be looking too deep into this. That you've got to meet your maker, kind of thing.
The thing that it only occurs to you quite late in the episode, and it plays out throughout future series as well, and ones in the past, is when Crichton says he's been trailing me for thousands of years. Yeah, you're right, because there's the 3 million years, sort of thing of where they're basically the past is literally catching up to them.
Yeah,
it's be it the post pod or Better Than Life or Hudson or a few other bits and bobs that come along the way. And I think that's interesting in that you can bring in new situations and new adventures and new characters, but they're actually from the past and they've only just caught up to Red Dwarf.
What I think is really important about this scene, and it's kind of almost a ongoing plot of the entire series, the first 2 episodes, they are split into groups of 2. And then from episode 3 onwards, they are a team and then they are a friendship group. So it progresses through the series where they all come together and form a significant bond. And that culminates in the fact that they all rally around Crichton and say that they will, Hudson has to get through them to get to him and that they will defend him. And I think it's really nicely, but quite subtly done that over the space of series 3, the friendship and the friendship of the group and also the dynamic of the show changes to what it then becomes in series 4.
Yeah.
It's the first sort of mention of them being a posse as well, isn't it? when they're waiting for Hudson to come in, Cat says, if they want to mess with the Red Dwarf posse on their homeboy turf. So it's just edging closer to Boys from the Dwarf.
Yeah. I mean, they did have clitoris. They were referred to as clitoris in a few episodes ago.
I love the fact that it's because of that they got the 18 certificate on that video.
Hudson is a scary motherfucker, and he tells Crichton that he should be dead. And then the rest of the Boys from the Dwarf say that you have to go through them. Crichton says that Hudson can't hurt humans, and this makes Rimmer super, super brave.
Oh, apparently, I'm not 100% sure on this. I might be misremembering this slightly, but the voice came from, it was like a football announcer. So, it's like Liverpool 2, blah, 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 1. And it was something that Gordon Kennedy had done for something. I don't know if it had aired or not, but he was using that voice. And that's where the voice came from.
It sounds like it hurts.
Yeah, he just started doing it on set, apparently. And then that obviously became the voice of Hudson.
But it's super sinister, so I think it's a good call.
Yeah.
I think he said as well that because he's got it's a bit like how my beard is, but he's got the makeup line going down his cheekbone line.
Yeah, to accentuate it.
To make him seem more angular. And when he said how are we going to cover up my big jowly face? And don't worry. And they painted it in.
Brilliant.
I was like, yeah. He looks terrifying, doesn't he? With the slick back hair as well.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder, though, because of how he looks, which is like a killer, he's supposed to be the servant droid.
He's a lot more like a replicant, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He
is.
And he also has Terminator vision. Let's call a spade a spade. He's got fucking Terminator vision.
That or RoboCop.
Yeah. And the things that he comes up for them are ex-human hologram for Rimmer, Felis sapien for Cat, and barely human what the hell for Lister, which, as visual gags go, that did make me smile.
I do love that gag. I like the fact that Cat's species is recognised now. It's I really like that gag of what the hell. Yeah.
The term Felis sapien does make sense, though,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It took me a while. When I was younger, I didn't fully understand the gag of Rimmer going, it's been a while since I've done that. I'm right. I think he shit himself, hasn't he?
Yeah, he's definitely shit
that's
himself.
What it was, yeah. I didn't know. I think it was a kid. I was like, he's wet himself. It's like, no, he hasn't.
Yeah. But what I really like about it is just the confidence in him. It's like, it's his bluffing his program not to harm humans. And he goes, right, okay. Yeah. Excuse me. Yeah. I can deal with this now. I'm the big man.
Yeah.
The way he pushes past everyone is just so... Oh, yeah. Just setting... You can tell from the second he steps forward, he's going in for a fall.
Yep. It is Rimmer. Come on. He's almost always going in for a fall.
True. It's going to be horrific. But, yeah, it's... but it's quite good in that way, going back to the friendship thing, in that now Rimmer thinks he can't get hurt. He is going to stand up for Crichton.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's going to give this guy what for, and with a full Maladio.
Unfortunately, Hudson does shoot at Rimmer, and he dives out the way. And
do you see what he dives behind?
Remind me.
It's a gas bottle.
That's not wise.
He only got blown up an episode before.
Oh, that's a good point. You'd think he'd have learned. Hudson says he's only doing his job, but he loves it. And basically his sanity chip has blown because he's been alone and chasing Crichton for so long. That's a really nice way of wrapping it up, why this guy's a psychopath, I thought.
Yeah, it's corruption, isn't it? Corruption of his files and stuff like that, which works.
It's the exact opposite of Crichton. Crichton has broken his programming because of friendship, whereas Hudson has broken his programming because of being completely lonely. And I think that's two really nice sides of the same coin, and really quite kind of hard, deep sci-fi type vibes for me.
I mean, it shows as well there's the element of choice with androids. In that before Crichton met the Red Dwarf crew, he was on the Nova 5 on his own. And he could have gone mental, but he chose to. Well, he did. Yeah, but
he was serving skeletons for a while.
But it was a good-hearted mental. He didn't sort of immediately get the escape pod, arm himself to the teeth, and go looking for fresh. But he continued to make tea and do people's makeup for them.
He was only away for 2 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those things. Like if they did this episode now, there'd be like a little online special film of Gordon Kennedy just sitting in a pod, just going slowly crazy, in the same way that Doctor Who do the little YouTube videos before a series. Yeah. It'd be good for them to start for doing those. But another quotable thing that is, I'm just doing my job. It's not my fault if I love it.
Yeah.
I've said that before.
I have definitely said, well, to coin a phrase, whooops.
Yeah.
I've definitely yeah, that's quotable Red Dwarf for me too, to coin a phrase, whoops. Yeah. Crichton says he'll sort it out and then dismantles his bazookoid. And Hudson grabs him and prepares to kill Crichton with a coup de grace.
That bazookoid falling apart is amazing. He couldn't have fallen apart any better. It's just it's just perfect.
And we've been talking about how we've got to this point 6 episodes in where we've definitely got Robert Llewellyn playing Robert Llewellyn's Crichton by this point. His face, so good. Crichton face when the bazookoid falls apart really made me smile. Good face.
I think that I know about this, when he gets pinned to the wall, and Hudson draws his fist back. He doesn't do it as a punch. He does it as a straight fingered
jab.
Thing, which for me was that is way more vicious.
Yeah.
And he gets shot in the arse.
He does. Lister blasts him, and it does nothing, so he punches Lister.
Yeah.
It's the way he looks. I mean, it helps that they were talking on the quarantine about the servo noises when he turns around and goes, and that's all the sound design. I mean, sound design's obviously made to make you feel thing, but it's just the way that the sound design of the gunshot going off, and then 2, just the way it looks, just looks around and looks at him and what are you doing? It's what was that about?
It's how jolly he gets during that point. It was oh, hang on, boys, you can't all die at once. And it's almost like the croaky voice goes a little bit because he's jollied it up, and then he goes back on point, and it goes a bit croakier again. See you in Silicon Heaven. And
it's at that point when he says "See you in Silicon Heaven," Crichton says that it doesn't exist. Holly confirms it, and this overloads Hudson. And so, Boys from the Dwarf win by pure luck, circumstance. I feel like we're setting a precedent.
Win is a win is a win. I like the fact that Holly, who doesn't really talk about it at any point in the episode, just pops up and says, there's no such thing as Silicon Heaven. As a machine, well, I suppose it's only in androids, but as a computer...
Yeah, an AI.
Holly's, and
obviously Crichton's lying.
Yeah.
Apparently, yeah. Or was he? I think...
Or deep down in this programming, maybe he's aware, so he isn't lying. That he says...
Yeah, I think it does leave it more ambiguous than you might think on the first watch.
But it ends on a fist bump and a freeze frame, which is a great late 80s way to go out.
Damn it, yes.
Late 80s being this is the final episode of 1989. Bear in mind it was released 19th of December as well. So
yeah.
That's it. It's end of the 80s.
It's just about 2 steps short of that. I can't remember which Schwarzenegger film it is where he does you son of a bitch slap and hold grips hands and that kind of thing. You just see, I think it's over the top.
Over the top, yeah.
And
yeah.
It was just a bit short of that.
Over the top. What a great film. Yeah. I'm just going to turn my cap round.
Nice. And this
now
is
I'm 20 times stronger.
This is a audio medium, but we can see each other on camera, and Kurt did act Ocean to turn his cap around at that point. I think it's worth our listeners knowing this.
And we can have a visual arm wrestling match where I actually do over the top
Oh, for goodness sake. They were both actually pretending to arm wrestle each other on Zoom. They've just, what's wrong with you both? But anyway, that is the last day.
You were refereeing it.
I was.
You're in the middle.
And that was, for me, that was a much better episode than I remember it being. It was just one that kind of like faded into the background for me over the first 8 series that I watched quite a lot of. And it surprised me by how much I enjoyed it and how important it is for the kind of establishment of what Red Dwarf is going forward.
Yeah, because you've got thematically, as you say, the whole friendship thing. You've got the Lister's origin story, which isn't actually come back into it till season 7. You know, that doesn't come back till season 7, and then I think it doesn't really touch upon it after that until season 10, I think. And there might be something earlier than that, but season 10. So you've got even like little bits like that, you know. So, but it's from a thematic point of view with the friendship and as you say, the boys and the posse isn't quite the boys from the dwarf yet, but you know that's coming soon. So I think it's definitely a great season with that one little hiccup in the middle, which I'd still say is still not a bad episode. It's just the quality that we've had. It is a drop in quality.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a bad episode.
I think that's true.
And as we were sort of talking about, I think if this, because they thought this might be the end of the whole thing. If that's the case, it's because in this show, like, it's almost a sort of almost a subdued ending. Like there's no big cliffhanger. There's no sort of massive pomp and circumstance coming out of it or anything like that. They don't kill an alien or rescue the ship or anything like that. But it's like, say, over the course of the series, we've now got this established team together and the friendship, and with the fist bump and things like that. It's almost like, I don't know if any of you ever saw the last episode of Angel.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. The idea with that is they're going to leave it at this point, and it could either be the end or it could be the point of where the next thing's going to start from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's what they've done here, in that, like, everybody's good. Hey, boys from the dwarf, bosh. And then, you know, it could go on from here if we chose to, but if not, it's a good point to leave it. But I'm very glad that it carried on. But what, another 20 years? 20? Yeah.
Yeah. And I think if it had finished there, it would have been fondly remembered as a quite good show from the 80s. I don't think it would have had a chance of being the truly culty, phenomenally British and loved TV show that it is now. But I still think it would have had 3 really good series that people would have fondly remembered. And it maybe, I don't know, it might have been a right in the childhood episode rather than a deep dive podcast, you know?
Yeah, because we're about to hit, basically, with series, I think 4 through to 6 is the prime.
I would agree with
it?
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's, I'd say 6 is probably the peak of the run. But 4 and 5 are definitely going up there.
Yeah. I don't think you find many Red Dwarf fans that didn't put 4, 5, and 6 as the best series, I don't think, when they were on their game.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting ranking these at the end of the run, because there has been some reevaluations on certain things. However, on that colours stuff, we don't know. We'll see. But you know, as I say, for the episodes, I know that Carl's got a slightly different opinion on the what episode were we talking about? Body Swap. I do think it's the weakest of the 6 in this one. And it's probably the weakest we've had so far. Me too. I think personally, but
I think I agree with you, Kurt.
I think with Body Swap, one of the things I like about it is the concept, and the actual, as daft as I want to say, the technical thing of getting them synced up, but the performances of Chris Barry and Craig Charles as each other, basically.
Well, one
of the
debates we had was like it feels like quicker editing and there's shorter scenes, and we were questioning whether or not that was because you're waiting for the laughter track on a lot. You're waiting for the laughter in a live studio audience kind of area. And this wasn't recorded in front of an audience, or that wasn't recorded in an audience. It was played back to an audience. So where they expected to have a joke, they would leave a gap. So you don't know how long that gap would have been. So the editing's slightly different. And obviously, as you say, with I'm a technical person. I actually think it's amazing what they've done. And we did talk about this on the episode about how it was harder for Chris Barry to do his ADR compared to Craig Charles, because Chris Barry did all the vowel faces with his actual lips, whereas Craig Charles didn't. So it was more of a struggle for him to do the ADR.
It's really noticeable on that when he says something like brutal.
Yeah.
You can sort of see.
Yeah.
Plus, I think as a fat kid in the late 80s, early 90s, everybody wanted to stick their head in a giant plate of mashed potato and tip gravy over themselves.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, yeah, that is the end of Series 3 of Shipwrecked and Comatose. We've got a couple of specials on the way, and I'm quite pleased with what we've come up with. We are basically going to do a Right in the Childhood episode on Red Dwarf, so I'll be bringing in Fraser and using our format. That's up next. And after that, well, Carl, you're going to be doing a Cerebral Jukebox episode with looking at Tongue-Tied.
Yes. We're going to look at the 1993 re-release and the terrible remixes that came with it. And the video, I believe, as well, the 90-minute VHS that got released along with it all. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to going through that one, definitely.
And then after that, we'll be going straight into Series 4, and we'll be rocketing our way through it. It feels like we only started this like a few months ago, but I feel like a bit like the series, we've hit our stride now.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You know, we've had our hiccups and we've had our technical issues and we've changed things around and we've done different things. I think we're finding our feet, and you know, hopefully we'll have a chameleonic life form that can change form. Next episode, that's our ultimate desire. So we'll see.
That's going to be an interesting discussion, I think.
It'll be fun. It'll be great fun.
So all we've got left to do is, Carl, where can people find you on the internet?
People can find all the things I'm up to, including Cerebral Jukebox, at allmylinks.com/Mr. Carl, and it's MISTER. And yeah, everything's on there, sort of different podcasts, film nights, quiz nights, all the kind of things I get up to. And you can find it all there.
How about you, Kurt? Where can people find you on the internet?
We made this podcast network, basically. No, you can find me on the Star Trek Picard podcast, Make It So, on Twitter at Jean-Luc Podard. Find me on the X-Files podcast, which is the Xcast. That's the X_cast at the on Twitter. You can find me completing my Millennium deep dive as well. We're into season 3 of that, coming towards the end of the 3-season run. And that's on the Time Is Now pod. And if you wanted to come and find me personally to see what I'm up to, where I'm guesting on, what I'm doing here and there and everywhere, then come and find me at my Twitter feed, which is at rmuldrake, which is RMULDRAKE.
And if you're looking for me, I'm also on many podcasts. We've mentioned Right in the Childhood, so I don't need to explain that. That's RITC Pod on Twitter. I'm also on Super Tat Film Club, which is a B-movie podcast. That is at Tat Club on Twitter. And I also have a podcast related to my job as a humanist celebrant. Remember, I got all chatty about secular stuff and seemed to almost have a clue. That's why. That's at Life's Milestones on Twitter. And probably by this point, I'm hoping to have launched the podcast we mentioned earlier, Aunt Nell, a Polari podcast. That is at Aunt Nell Pod on Twitter as well. If you want me, I'm also on Twitter at MarkAdamsHC.
More podcasts.
More.
Well, what it was I was drawing with Kurt for the number of podcasts that I had. So I thought, right, I'm not having that. I need another podcast. So I've got one more than Kurt.
Okay, I might be doing a new one soon.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
To be fair, I might as well, actually.
Oh, for fuck's sake. It's more addictive than crack.
Mm.
Not that I've ever taken crack.
Just to clarify.
There's a joke in there somewhere, and I couldn't quite get there.
And that is a beautiful way to end our series. So until next time,
Oh, stop it, Uncle Frank.
Well, to coin a phrase, whoops.
Elsewhere on We Made This. The time is now. A Millennium podcast.
I hate Hollywood. I hate the way these stories are told. It's everything. They hit the same beats. They hit the same rhythms. It's kind of like, it reminds me of like a blues thing, where it's like, well, a lot of people love the blues, but I realize that it's everything has the same underlying structure. Everything is like 12 bar, 1/4/5, pentatonic. Everything is following the same core elements, and it just gets exhausting after a while.
It does. I remember going to see Gary Moore, and as much as I enjoy music, I enjoy going to see bands and things, and after about, I'd say 30 minutes, I was like, I need to check out.
We buy records.
How much would you sell this record for on Discogs? Now, the record in question is Microsoft DOS on a vinyl album, which you can actually boot a PC with.
You've got to be kidding.
I'm not kidding. Does this sound bring back any memories? From what I can gather, it looks like they've done it as a hobby project, but if it was commercially available...
All it needs is an incredibly vaporwave sleeve, and I guarantee that hipsters would pay a fortune for that.
We are Starfleet.
So this was kind of a nice callback to the elements that were used on TOS. And it really stuck out to me, and it just, as I keep saying every week, there's always a little give and take, right? Where the writers bring in this element from TOS or TNG or from Voyager, and it fits into the Discovery realm.
Yeah, and I'm glad that they didn't draw out Giorgio seeking medical attention for her issue. I was a little worried.
Check out all of these shows and more on the We Made This podcast network.
Shipwrecked and Comatose, a Red Dwarf podcast, was created and produced by Mark Adams and Kurt North. You can find us on Twitter at Red Dwarf Pod, and we are part of the We Made This podcast network, which can be found online at wemadethispod.com or on Twitter at We Made This Pod.